Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we've got a pretty important discussion on solar. Tesla doing a little bit of advocacy here. We'll also talk about Tesla stock and the macro environment. We've got an update on cold weather performance like we had talked about yesterday, news out of China, Berlin, and Texas, and an update on GM. All right, so as we had talked about yesterday, today was a pretty highly anticipated macroeconomic day with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell testifying to the Joint Economic Committee. First time we've heard thoughts from him since the December Fed meeting minutes were published and kind of spooked the market at the beginning of last week. So the markets opened down this morning, and then as Powell was speaking a little bit after market open, flipped over into the green. Apparently the market reacting positively to some of those comments that he made, which from my perception mostly seems to be a reaction to no worse news happening. I don't know that there was a ton of really good news here or positive news for the markets. For instance, I don't think there was really anything there to change expectations on interest rate hikes. That definitely still seems to be the direction that Powell wants to pursue. A lot of the discussion was around inflation. Of course, we have heard, is inflation transitory or not? The Fed kind of reversing their statements on that in the past. Of course, higher inflation has persisted, and as we talked about yesterday, we'll get an update on that with the CPI Consumer Price Index released tomorrow morning. But as for today, Powell's main thoughts seem to be, quote, inflation is running very far above target. The economy no longer needs or wants the very accommodative policies we have had in place, end quote. However, Reuters also reporting that Powell also said that he now thinks inflation will ease by the middle of this year, but that the Fed is ready to tighten borrowing costs as needed to be sure that it does. Quote, we are going to have to be humble, but a bit nimble, Powell said, in deciding when and how fast to raise interest rates and change the Fed's asset holdings, which have ballooned as a result of its pandemic-related support for the economy, end quote. So again, I don't think there's really anything there that would have changed expectations too much from the market. Probably more just a matter of getting through this event that carried possible downside, but that is just my best guess. So anyway, the Nasdaq today finishing up 1.4%. Tesla actually underperforming, only up 0.6%, closing at $1,064.40, which was a little bit surprising. I would have expected Tesla to actually outperform in this type of an environment, especially given the fact that Morgan Stanley did increase their price target yesterday after hours, like we talked about on the podcast yesterday. All right, next up here, we've got a pretty important discussion on solar. I have actually mentioned this on the podcast before, but it was kind of towards the end of an episode and it was pretty brief. So I do want to revisit this, and I do think it has potentially broad-reaching implications. What we're talking about here is the newly proposed net metering structure for California from the California Public Utilities Commission, which seeks to impose an $8 per kilowatt per month fee on residential solar owners. That ends up being an extremely significant cost increase on owning a solar system. Let me just show you why with some really quick math. Tesla lists a 4.8 kilowatt solar system on their site, that's their smallest one, for about $9,600. There is a 26% federal tax credit right now in the United States, so that system would end up costing about $7,100. Even on just a 10-year loan, which is how Tesla's got it structured on their website, I think you could actually even go longer, but on a 10-year 3% interest rate loan, a system like that would have a monthly cost of $69. If you then add an $8 per kilowatt fee, that adds a little bit more than $38 per month to a system of this size. That ends up being a 55% increase on your costs. That more than offsets the entirety of the federal solar investment tax credit. That tax credit exists to accelerate the adoption of solar, to keep these monthly payments lower so that they more easily offset the alternative energy bill that you would have. So saying this another way, if California were to go ahead with this proposal because of the fungibility of money, effectively what California would be doing here would be taking all of that federal incentive, and instead of that going to their residents, they would be taking it and applying it to their grid. Is that not extremely messed up? Like, this is supposed to support solar energy. California, in one fell swoop, would be strongly disincentivizing solar in the face of that federal incentive, while also then relying on that federal incentive for anyone to even build a solar system in their state so that they can get this $8 per kilowatt fee every single month. That's super messed up. If there were no federal incentives, I would still disagree with it, but I guess it wouldn't be unethical. This is like borderline unethical to me. This would basically be like a state saying, oh, there's a $7,500 EV tax credit. What we're going to do is make a $7,500 EV registration fee for infrastructure access. It's just complete nonsense. It works in direct opposition of what the federal government is trying to achieve and effectively relocates federal funds just into California's grid. So I think it's a ridiculous proposal, particularly that part of it, but that's not the only change they want to make. They also want to change the net metering structure to significantly reduce the prices that solar owners are able to sell their power back into the grid for. They want to drop that down to wholesale rates, regardless of their current grid demand. Now, net metering is a tricky subject, good arguments on both sides for structures there, so I have less strong feelings on that piece. But overall, this proposal is very concerning, not just for the federal funding piece of it, but because other states may look to California to shape their policy as well. So the reason we're talking about this again today in particular is because Tesla has been sending out emails to customers trying to encourage them to provide feedback while the California Public Utilities Commission is accepting that public feedback. So we could see a ruling on this as early as January 27th. And there's also a public meeting this week, Thursday the 13th. So in addition to that email, Tesla set up a whole site explaining this proposal and how to provide feedback. And of course, I'll link to that in the description today. All right, next up, I've got a little bit of follow-up on some of the cold weather issues that we had talked about yesterday. This was shared with me from a Canadian Tesla owners group on Facebook, so take that for what it's worth. Sometimes those sources aren't always great, but this seemed pretty interesting, informative, and reasonable. So I'll just read through what they said here about some vehicles having HVAC issues in extreme cold temperatures. It says Tesla is taking this cold weather climate problem very seriously. They're very worried about the safety of drivers and have definitely prioritized this issue. The tech is on a group chat with engineers in Fremont and Alaska and has been working directly with them over the past few weeks to figure this out. They're all working together, and when necessary, some parts from cars, including Mark Croker's, by the way, that is the person whose tweet we had shared and discussed yesterday, are being overnight shipped to California for them to figure out what is going on. I also am encouraged to hear why a software update is going to make a really big impact immediately for all Y/3 owners, and the update is in progress now, ETA unknown, but as soon as possible. Number one, the heat pump system actually has the ability to work really well, even in temps colder than negative 30 degrees Celsius. That'd be negative 22 Fahrenheit, because there are two loops that use compression and expansion of the refrigerant, going from liquid to gas to liquid, and those loops can produce heat even in the extreme cold. The Alaska team has been testing this in super cold, and it does work well, so fundamentally the heat pump can and will work in our climates. Number two, one of the observed causes of a climate failure that has been diagnosed is the front air intake flap freezing open and blasting cold air into the system when driving on the highway, which is preventing the heat pump system's ability to work correctly. The cold air passes by a sensor and tells the climate system it's failing, and then you get the famous error and the compressor just stops. One of the things they're potentially going to do with software as a quick win is allow the compressor/system to keep working even if the flap is not functioning properly, and of course they're trying to figure out how to prevent this in the first place. Of note, the tech recommended ensuring the black grille on the front of your car is clean and clear, as snow/ice buildup there can cause the flap to not open/close properly. All right, so that's the end of that note. Hopefully that gives us a little bit more insight into what the actual problems people are having here are, as well as what Tesla's going to do to fix them. And it seems like that solution possibly may just come down to some software tweaks. So like I said, I'll try to continue to keep an eye on that and pass along any updates that I see. All right, next up today, we do now finally have the China Passenger Car Association reports for December. Moneyball on Twitter sharing those reports out. And as expected, based on those Tesla Analyst Shanghai tweets that we had talked about, retail sales in China for December did come in above 70,000, 70,602 vehicles to be precise. Then adding a couple hundred more vehicles exported, wholesale sales came in just below 71,000. Putting those numbers into our tracking table really highlights how strong December and Q4 in general was, particularly for domestic sales in China. That 70,000 retail sales number, that was 35% above the previous single month record back in September. And it wasn't just December. For the fourth quarter as a whole, exports were only up 4% sequentially, while domestic deliveries in China were up 58% in Q4 from Q3. Now, I think you all know I usually don't care where Tesla sells cars, but it is still nice, particularly in China, to see those good domestic numbers. It might not be great for average selling prices, but it certainly helps build a stronger narrative around China for Tesla than what we saw, for example, in Q2, when demand concerns were being heavily talked about and were pretty widespread. Last thing I'll note on this table is that with these December numbers, we do now have the total year 2021 numbers. And if we again look at retail sales here, we can see that Tesla in China sold about 321,000 vehicles in 2021. That would be more than a doubling year over year. All right, next up, we've got potentially a little bit of an update here on Giga Berlin. This has to do with water permits, which we've talked about before. And as I have said before, my current understanding, which definitely could be incorrect, but my current understanding is that Tesla currently has access to the water that they need, and these challenges that we are hearing about are from these so-called environmental groups. Could then change that, but I believe in the interim period of time, Tesla would be fine, and obviously I wouldn't expect these challenges to end up going anywhere anyway. So again, could be wrong on that, but the small update that we have here is that a spokesperson for the Frankfurt Administrative Court that would be ruling on this case has said that, quote, the chamber intends to terminate this process in a timely manner, end quote, adding that that could possibly be in February. So I don't think you should get that mixed up with final approval or anything like that. This would be separate, but still good to know a little bit more on that timeline. On over to Giga Texas then, we've got an update here today from Jeff Roberts, who does drone flyovers there. Spotted some eDrill equipment being transported into the factory. So this looks like new equipment arriving. This is probably casting machines. That's what eDrill makes. And this would now be the 4th casting machine or Giga Press for Giga Texas. I don't think we have any way of knowing if this would be the 8,000 ton press for Cybertruck or if this would be the smaller ones for Model Y, but my guess would be for Model Y. So with 4 of these now, Tesla should have enough casting equipment to cast parts for 500,000 plus vehicles per year. It's always a little bit tricky to tell with these kind of things, but hopefully with that amount of equipment there already, that could hint at a faster intended ramp up to those levels of production than what we have seen for Giga Shanghai. All right, lastly today, we're for the first time on Tesla Daily bringing a little bit of sponsorship in here because we've got an exciting new credit card offer to announce. I'm just kidding. I would never do that. But we do have some news here, and that is that GM has announced a new credit card, and you can earn GM rewards points. First of all, I just think the concept is kind of funny. Like, how often are people spending money with GM that they want to optimize their credit card rewards points around GM? I'm not sure, but they say that you can get 7 times rewards points for every single dollar you spend at GM, and unlimited 4 times points for every single dollar spent elsewhere. Now, I'm not sure exactly how they're structuring their reward system, but they call it the card that earns you unlimited 4% towards a new GM vehicle. So presumably then every 100 points would be worth $1. So if you spend $25, you'd have $1 towards GM vehicle. Oh, and one of the other perks you get up to $50 per year applied toward a vehicle detailing charge from a participating dealer. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're buying a lot of GM cars, this could make sense versus a different credit card, but I mostly just kind of found it amusing and I guess reflecting on it more, maybe a little bit depressing, but that's where we'll leave it for today. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Wednesday, January 12th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.